Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and a warm welcome from the organizing committee of this conference. This session, a very important and relevant one for the evaluation discourse in today's time. Many of us, the actors in the field of evaluation, talk about transformative changes both in the evaluation systems and in the social systems, through raising the need of breaking the hegemonic power structures, through raising the need of removing the rigid norms and perspectives that reinstate the threats of Anthropocene inequality and discriminations in new forms. In short, we need transformative changes to make this world a more livable place, equal to all segments of the community, both vertically and horizontally. But the big question still remains, where and how evaluation might play a transformative role. So the topic of this session is transformational change and evaluation. We have an excellent panel here today with great evaluation thinkers. They are all well recognized globally and highly regarded by the scholars, advocates, professionals, and practitioners, both in the field of evaluation and beyond. And we are fortunate enough that we have found the right person to chair this high-profile panel today. He is none other than Professor Rob D. Vandenberg. Professor Rob is not only a distinguished scholar of evaluation, he is also a top expert on the topic as far as transformational evaluation is concerned. I'm sure you know about him, but at the same time, it's perhaps only the right thing to introducing him without mentioning some of his past and present positions and contributions. Professor Rob is the former president of IDEAS, International Development Evaluation Association, a visiting professor at King's College London, honorary associate at the Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex. He is the chair of the advisory group of evaluation and learning at the Climate Investment Funds at the World Bank. One of his past positions include director of the Independent Evaluation Office of the Global Environment Facility, among many other positions that he held during his illustrious career. In 2020, he has co-edited a book entitled Evaluation for Transformational Change, Opportunities and Challenges for the Sustainable Development Goals. You may find his detailed bio note in the document that we'll be sharing now in the chat box. But before I hand over to Rob, let me remind you a couple of housekeeping rules. Keep your mic muted while you're not speaking. And if you have a problem with the bandwidth, you may keep your video switched off. So that's all from my side on behalf of the organizing committee. Now I hand over to Professor Rob. Over to you, Rob.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and perhaps good evening for some of you. And I'm very happy to chair this session. And we have a great panel for you. And what we will aim for is to have 10 minutes per speaker to allow them to present what they need to present and to allow sufficient time at the end for discussion. And if you want to raise questions at the end, you can either use the chat or the raise hand possibility, which you will find under reactions in the bottom bar of the Zoom meeting. I will also follow the UN protocol of talking about all of your achievements. So titles are not in use in the UN. So I'm just Rob Vandenberg. I'm not a professor here in this meeting. We are just presenting the ideas that we can contribute to transformational change and to further promote the discussion between all of you on these issues. So let me start by presenting transformational change. I know that some of you have questions about what is actually meant by this. I'll share my screen and show you a definition of transformational change that may help us understand what is meant by all of this. If we look at transformational change in general, a neutral scientific definition would be that it is change that fundamentally changes relations, actors, and/or boundaries of systems or between systems. So it's a definition that often is used in systems science or complexity science. But of course, in politics and in the real world out there, we have political and societal intentions included in the definition. And the clearest version of this is actually to be found in Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, adopted in 2015 by all member states of the United Nations. Agenda 2030, in its introduction, says that we need to transform our world and take the bold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world onto a sustainable and resilient path, balancing the three dimensions of sustainable development: the economic, the social, and the environmental. So this is an indication of what transformational change means in terms of development and in terms of putting our planet on a sustainable path. So if we look at the three systems of the social, economic, and environmental domain, this is just an abstract presentation. It doesn't really, it pictures basically the interactions that are currently taking place, which is not too much. Because basically the economic domain uses labor out of the social domain and resources out of the environmental domain. And this is what is exactly the unbalanced nature of our current arrangements. So if we look at three large and global initiatives to change this, that would be the Just Transition initiative to ensure that in the future the economic domain would not continue to exploit the social domain. And it would be an energy transition, which would make the environmental domain deliver energy through renewable resources to us. And it would be the donut economy, as advocated by Kate Raworth, which would focus on the interactions between all of this. And as a result, the interactions between the domains would increase, and it would result in a balanced situation. So this is just a quick way of showing you the kind of issues involved in transformational change and how difficult it is. We have then a strong list of panel members, and I'll give the floor to each of them. First, I want to introduce Ian Goldman, who is well known for his writings on evaluation systems and governance. And I very much advise you to look at his bio and at his list of publications. And I would like to give the floor to him on the issue of the use of evaluation systems to transform society. So your 10 minutes start now, Ian. Success.
Sorry, good to be with you all. And I'm going to be talking about how we can focus on not just evaluations, but evaluation systems to transform society. And just quickly, what are the challenges that face us? I mean, if you look at the pledges and targets, it's supposedly 2.4 degrees of global warming that's going to happen. But current policies are actually taking us to 3 degrees C. And where I live in Southern Africa, it's projected that temperatures will be double the global average. So 6 degrees, potentially 6 degrees of warming. We can imagine what catastrophic effects this is likely to lead to. We've begun Earth's sixth mass extinction. 1 in 4 species are at risk of extinction. You can see some of the figures there. And at the same time, when you look at where this is coming from, actually, if we just take emissions, 50% of emissions are coming from the top 10% of the population. So that's obviously the developed West, and it's the rich people, the richer people in countries like South Africa and India, etc., who are the ones who are actually contributing to this. So inequality is an absolutely huge issue that has to be resolved. So we have to move beyond individual evaluations to systems. Now, what do we mean by systems? So I like Lazaro's definition here. Evaluation systems where evaluation is a regular part of the life cycle of public policies and programs. It's conducted in a methodologically rigorous and systematic manner in which its results are used by political decision makers and managers, and those results are made available to the public. They're permanent frameworks, processes, and cultures that institutionalize and standardize evaluation. And you can see evaluation in the discourse, and the evaluation systems acknowledge that the system needs to provide sound evidence, the capacity to use information and evidence, and the capacity to broker that supply and demand, sometimes talked about as knowledge brokering. But what do evaluations focus on? Unfortunately, all too often, they focus on uncontroversial topics, fiddling with performance a little bit here, a little bit there. And that's preferred by many commissioners because it doesn't get to things that are controversial. And it may be needed to focus on these types of things at an early stages to get acceptance of evaluation systems and to get them established. But at the same time, when we're heading towards a cliff that we're about to fall off, we need to be looking at the systemic challenges that are facing the world. So we need to look at what society needs, whether it's the climate crisis, ecosystems crisis, inequality crisis, the antimicrobial resistance crisis. We need to be looking at some of these big issues, and we need to push some major transformational agendas. So how can evaluation systems help? Well, we can try to systemize demand for more transformational evaluations. For example, through national evaluation plans, etc., where strategic evaluations are selected. And we can also try and ensure that all evaluations consider these systemic issues facing humanity and the planet. For example, an evaluation of a school feeding schemes could also consider how the food is produced, how it's transported, the proportion of meat, is it produced by the local community, etc., etc. And in fact, in South Africa, the South African M&E Association, we're working on 2 guidelines to integrate transformative equity and to integrate climate and ecosystems health into all evaluations. So watch the space about how that goes. Next thing is ensuring that evaluation results are used. We have to try and make sure that of ownership of the evaluations at the outset. We have to ensure that key stakeholders play their part. For example, we did an evaluation of the environmental governance of mining, and we struggled to get the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy to play a full part. We need to ensure that evaluations are followed up, for example, through improvement plans. We need to try and ensure that plans and budgets have to use evaluations and consider what evaluations are saying, as all too often, I mean, that doesn't happen. And we need to bring in our other actors into the system. Too much of our economic system and our political system has been taken over by the powerful groups in the economy who have a nexus relationship with our politicians. So we need to try and make sure that other actors are influencing what happens. So we need to involve Parliament in the evaluation system. For example, in Mexico, all evaluation reports go to Parliament. And we can try and get parliaments to check on the improvement plans to see whether departments are following up on them. And we need to look at involving civil society in the evaluation system. If we think about the transformation that's needed in society now, it's going to come because civil society pushes for it. It's not going to come because the democratic system, if you like, is producing it. That everybody's setting targets for 2050, not 7% emissions cuts this year. And so we can involve civil society in steering the system, for example, the National Evaluation Platform in Costa Rica, And we can look, for example, at making sure that civil society is involved in steering evaluations through their active participation and power in steering committees. So just basically to end up with, the world is facing catastrophic challenges. Evaluation must play its part and focus on this and not be diverted to look at administrative detail, which is not going to make a significant difference in the world and the difference that we need actually to make. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ian. That was a very good introduction, and you stayed within the time, so very much appreciated. And this is indeed, as new people have joined us, I'd just like to point out that we want to save time at the end for a long discussion. We go over to the second speaker. And let me also, seeing the richness of the information that Ian presented to us, assure all of you that the PowerPoints will become available for you later. Don't try to catch every detail and every nuance. There will be more nuance in the slides themselves. Not all of them will be presented fully, but you can use this in future. It is my pleasure to introduce Cristina Magro as our second speaker. And she advertises herself as a former council member of IDEAS and a current council member of the International Evaluation Academy. Oh, I should have said IDEAS board. But Cristina is actually also the co-editor with me of 2 books on transformational change that are available through open access, can be downloaded from the IDEAS website. So please have a look also on what we've written there. So Cristina is going to talk about the quest for transformational change and what does it take. So Cristina, your 10 minutes start now. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all of you. Thanks for EQI and APEA teams that organized this event, are organizing with a lot of professionalism. Thanks for the invitation. And thanks to Rob and Jan for the inspiring introductions that laid a lot of ground for the presentation that I'm going to do now. You excuse me for so many words in my slides because it's 5:30 in the morning here. So I need a lot of, I need sort of a walking cane to do this early this morning. So for some time now, I have been concerned with the need for maximum agreement in concepts, principles, and values regarding transformational change and regarding what we have to face now. This is due to the magnitude, the magnitude of the changes, systemic planetary challenges that we are facing and the calls for transformation. Jan presented a very nice quote by Lazaro, and he talks about the existence of an epistemological framework. This is a key expression for what I want here, because what I'm going to present is not the defense of new methods and new arrangements in our view of things, but of a deeper change, which amounts to a paradigmatic and epistemological change in evaluation. Now answering the question of this title, what does it take and for what? To allow for the realization of the evaluator's mission in contributing to make the world a better place for all through concerted action and sustainable results. If we don't have a clear direction of what to see and where we are going to, I doubt we will be able to be very much effective. And system thinking, in my view, lays the best ground possible for that. For a moment, I would like you to change your minds to focus on the socioeconomic and environmental domains, and not so much in the domain of the evaluation systems that we need to put in place. I know that for many evaluators, deep and profound theoretical reflections are not very much welcome, but Kurt Lewin can help us here, saying nothing more practical than a good theory. And I agree with him. Theories are toolboxes. We should see them simply as this. With unique and useful utensils, we need to draw attention to the right kinds of variables that need to be conceptualized and observed. System thinking came about in the mid of 20th century to tackle a critical epistemological gap in our traditional science, allowing for the observation and treatment of dynamic and interconnected complex phenomena, and for the full consideration of experience, which were thrown under the rug, as we say here, by traditional science. So to consider experiences for us evaluators very important, as we need to treat findings on the go. Dealing with systems and complexity, we have a different stance in this regard, so that system thinking can be understood as a different paradigm than those professed by scientific and philosophical traditions. A bold system thinking approach is embedded in an epistemology that puts into question concepts as reality, truth, independency between subject and object, and others. So we need, in my view, a proper and far-reaching engagement of evaluators with complex systems to support the changes the field demands nowadays. Again, let's think about what we are looking at, the environmental, economic, and social domains, and not so much in the evaluation systems that we have to arrange. We will have to make adequate for this. We have all the conditions, enabling conditions to engage in system thinking. There are references for the SDGs, there are the planetary changes, and in evaluation systems, an epistemological change towards a systems perspective has been called for by many evaluators. Significant literature has been produced in the field, some more theoretical, some more practical, and but it has not been mainstreamed in evaluation. On the other hand, we have the quest for transformational changes. So a shared operational understanding of transformational change is necessary. My experience listening to colleagues in different fora show that we still don't have this conceptual consensus. Rob indicated a direction for us, and understanding the dynamic of systems is important to allow for the transformations that Rob has indicated, for example, and of what I think we all are expecting to promote. So we need to know what we look for and what to recognize as transformations when we see them happening, or when we foresee opportunities to make them happen. In systems terms, transformations are changes that, although triggered locally, they activate trigger changes in interacting systems of the same or other domain. To use Patton's terms, in the workshop in Prague that he gave in the Ideas GA. Transformations are changes that happen across systems, but we need to understand how they happen across systems. What is it all about? What is this miracle that makes transformation across systems? And it's not a miracle at all. It's simply the dynamic of systems as they function, complex systems. These changes are dynamic, historical, emergent, uncertain, non-linear. That is, they are a function of the interaction between systems, including the context. Actual and potential interlinkages across systems need to be identified and explored as leverage points for transformational change. And this is not self-evident. We may not see them clearly at the onset of our work or for planning. To investigate changes of this kind requires going beyond the evaluants, which usually focus only in the system of immediate consideration. These challenges can be seen as opportunities to reframe the evaluation practice. One key concept in evaluation is the one of causality. And I'd like to give you this quote that I have. This is a disputed quote, but Talden seems to have modified someone else's quote, which I modified now, but every system is perfectly suited to get the results it gets, even if these are unexpected or unwanted. This means that we do not instruct systems to do what we want them to do. They do what they can do.
Christina, you are
Yes?
at 10 minutes.
10 minutes now?
Yes,
okay.
So you have 2 minutes left.
Okay, so we have also theory of change, which is a tool that needs to be adjusted according to systems principles and concepts. And we can probably discuss this later. The context, no systems exist in a void, and we very often bluntly refer to the context as something which is stable out there, and we should treat them as a system or a myriad of systems with which the system we are focusing in interacts. In the domain of the evaluation system, we know that the fact that institutions and organizations are not prepared to face so many challenges should not hinder initiatives and changes in the direction proposed. We have challenges in capacity development, which should go beyond training and also redefine competencies, a work that has been done. Bright perspectives in the field of evaluation. There's a significant body of literature. I'm not going to mention my favorite ones here, but there are lots of writers and thinkers that have brought work directed to evaluators, and also there are resources by non-evaluators that would help us to develop our capacities. Decolonization of evaluation and indigenous evaluations, and also mainstreaming gender and equity-focused evaluations and environmental sustainability are discussions that could potentially be transformational agents to sponsor the major changes in the field, as far as they are supported by a scientific paradigm that allows for the observation of complex dynamics and historical events. So I will stay here. And what I'm saying this last slide is that all enabling conditions are there, and we should just go for it. Have the courage to take this bull by their ears.
Well, thank you very much, Christina. This was really great presentation and full of details and really well prepared and food for thought for the group. So we have looked at evaluation systems and governance through the lens of Ian and received inspiration there. We've discussed transformational change concepts and what science and what systems science and complexity science tell us about this. And we now turn over to Zenda Ophir, the interim chair of the Council of the International Evaluation Academy, and known for so much more. Zenda has a great blog, for instance. There are so many more things that we can say about Zenda, but I refer you to the bios and of the speakers, and I really want to give the floor to Zenda to talk to us about current developments in transforming evaluation to evaluate transformation, a question that was posed already by Ian, but now will be developed further by Zenda. Zenda, over to you. Your 10 minutes start now.
Thank you, Rob, and let me just get my screen shared. In the meantime, thank you for this conference, this opportunity, and everything that hopefully this will lead to this conference. Now, I made the simple, and I just said towards evaluation fit for this time. I've recently given a lot
hello, Sender, we can't see your screen.
yeah,
maybe you can try again.
You know, my Zoom just informed me that it crashed and I have no idea why. So let me try again. I hope this does not happen again. Do tell me if you can see this. This is fine. Yes.
Yes, we can see the...
Right. So let me try again. Rob, please start me now on my 10 minutes. So I've given a lot of discussion, talks and writings also recently on how to use, for example, systems and complexity concepts in doing evaluation towards transformation. Today, I want to take a step back and talk about what this means for our field and where we are with this very, very briefly. The first point I want to make is that working and thinking about and working with complexity concepts, with transformation, with systems change is a responsibility of all of us. Not all of us work directly with transformation, but we do need to think about and be familiar with many of the concepts that are espoused as part of transformation, enabling transformational change, and the role that evaluation can play in that. And the reason is that the way change happens demands from us to do that. So I think many of us around this virtual table are very likely people who work not with global issues that had been highlighted, but on a local level, at project level. And we say that project thinking belongs to the 20th century, but projects as niche innovations still matter. And what I mean by that is to think about a project in isolation and evaluate using DAC criteria that do not reflect sufficiently issues of coherence, synergy, connections, relationships, and many other elements. Will ensure that we are limited in what we can do and will not contribute well to development, to poverty reduction, to climate change. Because change comes about through a combination of developments at micro, meso, and macro level. And I'm not sure whether you can see this. I trust that it's available visually to you. But when you look at projects, they're usually at micro level. They are niche innovations. But if there's enough of them aligned in synergy, working towards similar goals, they can exert pressure on systems that we want to change. But much stronger it is if we can also effect change through interventions at macro level, at the landscape level, where cultures and mindsets and other issues come into play. And then also very specifically changes at meso level, the institutions, the norms, the values, the frameworks within which that actually structure how our societies and our ecosystems work. So thinking about project level work does not absolve us from dealing with the concepts that Christina and Ian referred to. Second point, systems innovation and transformation are everywhere, and they're also nowhere in our field. So much is happening worldwide to help enable transformation, but application in evaluation practice is slow. To follow, as Christina pointed out, abundant theory and design examples, transformation design examples. And the reasons are systemic. We are in comfort zones. We are fearful of what appears to be difficult. We lack an appetite for taking risk. The politics of aid and reductionist thinking, especially about how we think change happens, it's too linear, it's too simplistic. And therefore, we often see that in evaluations, that change does not come. And we also do not evaluate then for the kind of things that are needed in interventions to enable change to happen in ways that complexity theory tells us it does. Now, foundations and climate specialists are actually leading the way. They are experimenting, and much has been done. Evaluators do not connect enough with transformation, complexity, and systems specialists. And in evaluation, transformation washing is rife. We've just done a panel, we were on a panel to select awards for the IFAD World Bank Ideas Transformational Evaluation Award. And of the 25 submissions that we received, no more than a handful had any idea of what transformation actually means and how it works when one tries to bring it about. Now, there are many advances in transformative change design in familiar spaces, and I give there a number of references. And these are very interesting and also, as you can see, of great variety, some dealing with transformative projects and how the criteria one can look at when you try to evaluate or work with transformative projects. There are systems-orientated work. There are countries like China's transformative development holds a huge amount of lessons about complexity for us. CCAN did a lot of work. But then in more familiar space is also the evaluation field with all those many types of evaluative practices that we have. And that's apart from many individual contributions that push the field forward. What is lagging is application. And my argument is that we need a different type of evaluator and evaluator commissioner and financier of evaluations. We need generalists, people who can work across sectors, across thematic areas, and across stakeholder and ideological and methodological boundaries. We need, for sure, most important, people who can apply systems and complexity theory in initiative design, implementation, and evaluation, because we are involved in all three at the moment. We need to be able to understand the psyche of a society, of community, not just their culture, but how they will respond to efforts to enable change. And we do not pay enough attention to that. It has certain implications for what we can try to look at. We need to be able to work with complex ethics because we need to deal with trade-offs. It is impossible to look at simple ethics and say, well, what will work in the short term for a community is what will work long term for a society, and therefore everybody's rights need to be protected, everybody's interest must be properly looked after, and we can do everything for everyone at once. There's a lot of trade-offs in long-term development, and that brings complex ethics to the fore. We need to be comfortable with digitalization, artificial intelligence, and other new technologies. We need to be comfortable with uncertainty, and therefore developmental evaluation, principles-focused evaluation, and many other ways of working with uncertainty and adjusting and also accompanying adjustments to theories of change and in helping to enable that, for example, is important. And we need to be much more future orientated in intelligent ways where we actually understand that the future is not a linear progression from the past. And even though transformation can take place with many incremental changes over a long time, our recommendations should go beyond incremental changes to improve operations and a little bit of strategy. We need to be far more aware of how to position our recommendations into a new future, especially the one that we face now. Therefore, we need to be boundlessly curious because we are faced with issues that now require us to understand much more of our countries, of regions of the world than we normally do. Very quickly, just 2 more points. Evaluation and transformation connect in 4 ways. The first is we can evaluate for transformation. In other words, support efforts to move towards a green economy, social and economic equality. We can also do evaluation of transformation, and that is transformations that we can't control, that we not that you can control, but that we're not trying to engineer. And that's COVID-19, climate change. We can assess responses to that and help enable a better responses to societal and ecological changes we can't control. Evaluation as transformation is having influential evaluations that can actually transform institutions or communities or societies. There are very few of those. It's very hard to do that, as our award has also shown. But for example, evaluations that drastically change approaches to development financing or to eliminate ESG greenwashing would be very influential and transformative. Evaluation in transformation is what my last point will be about, and that is drastic changes in our evaluation community, in our field, in how our field is conceptualized and perceived and operates, because we often still work with 20th century concepts in a world that has been transformed and is being transformed and has to be transformed. And that is something that I just want to touch on by using an example of a future-looking framework. It is something that is increasingly used around the world by people who have to deal with change. And I would very much, yes. 2 minutes, I hope. Yes. I'll finish in 2 minutes. So I do hope very much that to transform or even just to keep up with the future, to make evaluation fit for the future, we should consider being much more mindful of what changes are needed in the field. We know some of that intuitively, but we hardly ever get the input of people who use evaluation, who are on the periphery of what we do, who may not even know what we do, but can think about potential of evaluation practice. And certainly we do not draw in transformation specialists or people who try to enable transformation into our work. So something like the 3 Horizons type initiative, which helps us to go beyond our own thinking with a new lens on what should change, why, and how. It consists of a methodology that asks 8 questions. So it's a questionnaire sent to as many people as possible, as diverse as possible in, say, the evaluation field. They respond to that. It's clustered synthesis, and it's clustered around 3 things. What is it? And it's called Horizon 1. What is it? What are the current paradigms, assumptions, and so on that keep us from changing to what we need to be as a field? The third horizon is what should emerge, what paradigms, ideas, and innovations what would our future look like? Just 2 questions or 3 questions around that. And then the last horizon, and the most important one, is how do we get from the first horizon, where we are now, with all its barriers to change, to the third horizon, which is what a much improved field fit for the future would look like. Again, just 2-3 questions around that. And the synthesis provide the pathways.
To round off.
Yes. And the synthesis provide the pathways to get from horizon 1 to 3. So I trust we all will pay attention, not only in our own practice, to how to deal more with transformation, but also the field as a whole. And maybe that's a challenge to Apia and others who really want to work with a global agenda into the future in a time of transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zenda, for these very challenging concepts and thoughts, and a look at a potential way forward, which is going to be very interesting and very challenging for the evaluation profession, but also on how evaluation is going to be used, and evaluation itself is going to be transformed. Our last speaker, we're very happy to introduce Adhiraj Parthasarathi, if I pronounce your name correctly. I do hope so.
You have.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're very happy to have Adhiraj here, as he will present this challenging situation from the perspective of the government of India, which he is supporting on development monitoring and evaluation, as he is the director of the Office of DME in the National Institute of Transforming India. And he will talk to us about the current efforts that are being taken in India on the direction of transformational evaluations and transformational change. So Adhiraj, your 10 minutes start now. Thank you.
Thank you. I must say it is really an honor to be in the midst of all of you. And we've had some great speakers, and I wish there's not a lot more that I can add to what has already been said. So I'll be brief and quick. Let me just put up my screen. Can you see this? So I'm going to talk more from a specific perspective of what DMEO has been doing, not so much from a theoretical base, and talk about some of the challenges we face in instituting transformational evaluation within the organization, and in incorporating best practices and new thinking within our traditional evaluations. So transformational evaluation is integral in many senses to what Niti Aayog does. It's even part of our name, as has already been pointed out. We are the National Institute for Transforming India. DMEO, which is the Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office in Niti Aayog, is entrusted with the evaluation of all central sector and central supported schemes of the Government of India. It works on large-scale evaluations ranging from those of infrastructure and science and technology to more traditional ones such as social sector subsidies and so on. We are in the process, as other speakers in other sessions will tell you more about, we're in the process of formulating a national evaluation policy for the country and exploring new areas of evaluation like institutional evaluations, while also focusing on capacity building across states in India. In our understanding of transformation, this is building on the work that the speakers before me have done. There are three kinds of transformation change. There is the societal change, the change that focuses on sustainability and environmental concerns. And then there has been a third drive towards transformation change that comes from management theory, operations research, and business advisory. Which is a shift in the business culture of an organization. The emphasis being on the word culture, resulting in a change in the underlying strategy and processes that the organization has used in the past. This kind of transformation change is what we are trying to institute at DNEO, and also trying to understand and decipher in the institutions we are in the process of studying, primarily government institutions that are in a state of rediscovering and reorienting their objectives. So the key issues that DNEO is working on is, as I've already mentioned, building a knowledge ecosystem within India. The challenge that we face is dissemination, knowledge transfer and capacity building, formulation of best practices, and creating an evaluation culture, which is where, I mean, ultimately that is something that depends on demand, and our primary consumer is the government itself. So creating an evaluation culture that was responsive to new forms of information. Speakers before me have talked about having a common epistemological framework, and we are working in the direction of identifying that epistemological framework, which our end clients, the government of India, would be willing to adapt to and incorporate into their evaluation. And finally, reframing questions in terms of a theory of transformation, not in terms of a traditional theory of change. These are key issues that we're working on currently. I don't have answers. We have questions at this stage. We're still working out the best possible ways to implement these changes. So the challenges that we face are challenges that any evaluation or entity, especially one associated with the government, faces. One of the big challenges that we've faced has been disseminating and the findings to the actual end recipient and creating sustainable feedback loops that integrate their opinions. So we're trying in the direction of moving towards participatory evaluation, which is something that we are focusing on in the work that we do in DNEO. So what I would like to focus on for the remainder of this talk would be a new thing that we've started in NITI Aayog, which is an evaluation of institutions. Our focus is shifting from evaluations historically, which have been primarily of interventions, of schemes, of projects. As speakers before me have pointed out, project-based evaluations and project thinking belongs to the 20th century. So we're moving beyond that towards a holistic evaluation that incorporates institutions, strategies, policies, and especially institutions that are in a state of flux. So we're evaluating change and innovation as through a dynamic entity in flux analysis. So the key question that all of this brings us back to is rethinking the epistemological framework and the foundations of the way we do evaluation. So retraining evaluators who are used to doing normal evaluations, as the speakers before me pointed out, adopting systems thinking, which requires a paradigm shift. But most importantly of all, getting the end user, the governing bodies, to change their way of consuming data, change their understanding of what an evaluation study or what evaluation can achieve for them. So in sum, just to sort of firm up what I've already, to reiterate what I've already said, co-production of evaluation with those that are being evaluated is something that we're examining. Changing attitude towards at government entities, moving from incremental change to dynamic change, and strengthening the knowledge transfer and dissemination mechanisms. So that ultimately our evaluation is grassroots driven and incorporates approaches from below. And so the change is starting essentially from within the organization itself, from the way DNEO is practicing the culture of organization, culture of evaluation. And so the paradigm shift starts from within. And these are some of the practices that we've incorporated within DNEO and are in the process of rolling out as we speak. So that was just a brief description of the work that DNEO does. Back to you guys, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Oh, thank you very much, Adiraj. This is really excellent. I feel we've come the full circle. We started off with Ian looking at systems and governance and what would need to be done to include transformational evaluation into that. And we've ended with your presentation on how transformational evaluation can be included in the governmental perspectives of India. So this is very promising. And in between, we had Christina and Zenda presenting us theoretical and perspectives that and how to translate these into practical ways forward. So the floor is open for discussion. Let me again point out that these PowerPoints will become available to all of you, to the participants. Let me again say that in the interaction that we're going to have, you can raise hands and you can put questions in the chat box. I've seen a very lively discussion in the chat box, and many answers were already given to questions that were raised. So at first, I think I will give the floor to people who raise their hands. And the first hand that I see is of Janvi Andaria, if I pronounce.
Yes, you did. Thank you, Rob. Yes, you did pronounce it very well. No, yeah, and I can actually see Ian has also responded. I put it on chat as well, and Ian has responded. But you know what is very challenging often in parliaments is that because our democracies are also not the best. We do have faulty democracies as well. So I am very intrigued that when we say that we once you put something in the parliament, they've actually managed to change the policies in ways in which it has addressed the transformational components of programs, whether it is environment or whether it is to do with, say, gender equality or any of the inequalities that we have been speaking about. So just to understand a little more in nuance as to, what all did it take to make that happen?
Okay, that sounds like a straightforward question. Ian, would you want to respond?
Yeah, so I don't have outstanding examples of it working. What I think we do have to get, though, is a system where what I can say is that in South Africa, the national evaluations were all taken to parliamentary committees where they were debated. And in some cases, that was a really meaningful debate. And in some cases, it wasn't. So, I don't personally have any experience of any that because of that discussion, there was a transformative change in the program, except as I mentioned in the chat, there is at least one program where the parliament said, we need to understand how this is working, and they requested an evaluation be done of it. At the moment, I would say to get parliament to even consider evaluation, whether it's transformative or not, is a great step forward in itself. And trying to get ways that parliament systematically considers evaluations as part of their process of reviewing how departments are working or how programs are working is an important first step. And the reference I put in the chat is an example of us looking at it from 3 countries in Africa and how countries are trying to do it. Of course, it also depends how dynamic the parliaments are and how much you get. They're really independent and they're really prepared to ask searching questions of governing parties. That's a problem in itself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could we actually remove the slide on question and answer session? We know that it's the question and answer session, and I would like to see faces. Yes, that works better. Thank you. We can now choose whether to have a gallery view or the speaker view. So great to see all your faces. And of course, not everybody has their camera on, but let us continue on then with interaction. I don't see any hands up. I'm sure that some of you have good questions. Oh, I see the hand of Birendra Raturi. Could you come in, please? You need to unmute your microphone.
Okay, I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My question was that since this portion is addressed to the parliamentarian, and we also lucky to have the director of DMEO, we know for a fact that when we go for evaluations of such a large scale projects, implementations, and particularly in the Indian context, we are more of a we sort of have more of a social budgeting. So most of the projects and the investment is happening for the social sectors. We know that there are 2 things which are influence the most to the evaluation process when it happens. One is our political class itself, where the parliamentarian or the ministers has a role in terms of looking at the results, and also there is an internal role where in which they also have an influence on the monitoring and evaluation results. So my question would be that how do we address this issue? Because if we are looking at deficiencies with respect to the implementation part, then some of the beneficiaries or the stakeholders who matters, in that inefficiency of the implementation of such a large scale projects, how do we address that? And how do we bring that part of the, this policy program?
Thank you. I suggest that we gather a few questions and remarks and suggestions, and we'll then go over to the panel at the end to, and so please pick up some of these points later on, unless anybody from the panel would want to react now to Birendra's points. If not, then maybe I'll pick a question from the chat box. In fact, I would like to invite Vedasinga Miranda to pose her question in person, because you had some difficulty putting this in the chat box. Maybe it's better if you just explain to us what you were, the way I understand it, you raised the issue of whether parliaments or institutions should be the focus of transformational work. Could you come in? I am unable to talk. Okay, so I have raised your question. Any others that at the moment would like to pose an issue. I've seen comments in the chat box on the OECD criteria for evaluation. I've seen questions going in the direction of where can I find more literature on transformational change and on transforming evaluations. But
okay,
Chris,
Rob,
yeah.
I can speak now. Is it okay?
Okay. Oh, you can.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Please, go
my
ahead.
question is regarding the parliamentarian. It's actually to Ian, because we are very concerned of parliamentarian walking into the evaluation. What is the best? Is institutionalization of the evaluation in the parliament, or we are enhancing the parliamentarians? Because when the parliamentarians come and go, but the institution remain there. So my concern is that, because we have done that, but today at the present situation, we don't see that national evaluation policies having actively involved with Sri Lankan parliament. So what is the best? For me, the second best is the institution, but what's your opinion on that?
Okay, so this is a direct question to Ian. Ian, you want to come in?
Yeah, and I have to admit that I've also done I've designed a proposal for doing an evaluation, for setting up an evaluation unit in the Sri Lankan Parliament. Look, I think the first thing is, if evaluations are being done in government, Parliament should get access. So Parliament, in most parliaments, there's some role where portfolio committees have some role of oversight of specific departments. And they're in that role, in my experience, all too often what they're looking at is, for example, quarterly monitoring reports where they focus on detailed issues which are really not very important. And if they were using the evaluations, they would look at significant issues which these are raising about programs or policies, etc. So I think the first thing is to try and make sure that parliaments are accessing evaluations and they're able to use those as part of their oversight work of government. Having said that, there is the potential of parliaments also undertaking evaluations themselves, depending on the capacity in the research service. And I see Mohammed Ajwadin is from the Sri Lankan Parliament is here as well. So, so there is some capacity to do that if there's the will to do that. The challenge is the time it takes to do a full evaluation, but particularly doing sort of synthesis work where you're looking at existing studies and what they're telling you, that sort of thing. I think it's really good if parliamentary researchers do it themselves and they are able to actually then inform the parliamentary committees, because parliamentary committees often value much more what their researchers give them than they do external ones that are coming from government. So I would start with making sure parliaments access evaluations, and then one can move to them doing them themselves.
Thank you. Christina.
Thanks,
Christina, I see that you have raised your hand.
Mm-hmm.
You want to come in?
Yes, please. We are in a situation that was described in the beginning of system thinking times, when we said that we have to fix the plane during the flight. I see, well, evaluation was born multidisciplinary. It's a field that deals with lots of problems, lots of very hindering problems like governments, politics, etc. But we have also to pose ourselves the question zero. Are we addressing systems that we want to see their path of changes modified? So this is what I'm advocating for. We cannot, again, the idea of fixing the plane during the flight, we cannot stop everything, get everybody to school, but we have a lot of people who are system thinkers already, doing a lot of consistent work, as it was shown by Zenda and all colleagues, and we can start building capacities, developing capacities together. I think that we have to do this. We have to ask this question zero about the systems we are looking at to do a proper transformation. This is my point of view.
Thank you, Christina. I'm looking at hands raised, but at the moment, no hands are raised. Please feel free to ask attention for issues, ask further clarifying questions. There is full opportunity to, we still have about 15 minutes left. Please go ahead and raise issues with us. There is a discussion ongoing in the chat box between Zenda and Monica Niziolek, I'm sorry, and especially concerned about political influence and of evaluation or political consequences of evaluation. Monica, do you want to come in on this issue? Well, I see before we go to, oh, Monica, are you there? Because I now also have another hand raised.
Hello, it's nice to see you all. I have nothing more to add. I just had such experience that I conducted. It was even not evaluation, but needs assessment. And it appeared, that it appeared to be a problem because it was the moment before the election, like local elections, and there was a very big fear to publish this report. And I was informed by the commissioner that they will hide the report because they are afraid that their political opponents will use it, yes, against them. So it's just my personal experience. And now we are going, to influence our parliamentarians. As a VOPE, I am from Poland, and I am completely aware that it will be like, mission impossible. At least now when, this right wing is governed in Poland. What we observe is that evaluation is very strongly connected with democracy. I think that for your countries, for Western countries, it's obvious, but not for my country. We are democracy from not so long, yes, since the 1998. And what we observe that the more democracy, the more evaluation is present in my country. And the opposite now, when there is less and less democracy, yes, the democracy is becoming more limited, the less evaluation, the less demand for evaluation. We used to have a lot of, the huge demand for evaluation in the previous years when there was more democracy, and now it is less and less demand, yes? So I think it is a very important issue. Sorry for my long talk. Thank you very much.
No, this is, of course, very real. Monica, there is a, let's say, established governance systems that everybody accepts and are okay. And then as soon as you start changing the system, everything may be disrupted. And you may, and this is actually also in the literature, that transformational change can also be disruptive, or should actually be disruptive on many fronts. So there is a special challenge to tackle that, and and there is literature again, and there are some practical examples of how this could be done. So let's move over to Janvi Andaria. And I'll keep enough time at the end to allow the panel to come back to you all. So Janvi Andaria, yes, please.
Thank you, Rob. So the other big question one has been facing and I've been hearing is about the investments in evaluation itself. A lot of times there is a huge crunch in evaluation budgets. And when we say we want to do include, even like I come from the feminist space, so when you want to include gender concerns, which is a lot about qualitative aspects need to be included. Or now if you're talking about systems where you're saying that don't look at just the food program, but you look at the transportation, you look at everything. Are there enough resources being committed, and what will it take to get this kind of commitment from donors, from philanthropies, from the governments to or aid agencies, to invest in this, because so that you're able to actually bring to the table using the different frameworks. We now have enough frameworks. I mean, a lot of the resources that people have said is existing, the knowledge is there, but how do you get them to commit the time and the resources for it?
Thank you. Does anybody of the panel would want to react? Ian, I see your hand up. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this is a very good point. So I think what we're hearing on the panel, and I think this, having done some work on what evaluation systems exist in Asia, it's very nascent in Asia. You've only really got Nepal, where there's something, Philippines, something is developing, and India, where evaluation systems are really sort of developing. So you've got, on the one hand, you need to actually motivate for evaluation first. Then the second thing is we're now talking about, well, how can we do evaluation in a much more transformative way? So it's like a whole new dimension of thinking about it. And many countries are not there, unfortunately, because we're about to go off the cliff. So, fiddling around while Rome burns is not really a great option. So there is this challenge here. But I think one of the things one has to do is to show, I mean, there's a slide I often use when I'm talking to senior managers and politicians, which shows the first 10 evaluations we did in South Africa, first 10 national ones. And it shows that nearly all the programs needed major changes to them. And then I say to them, what are the implications of that? And basically trying to get the messages that what you're doing is probably not working very well. And in the process, we're wasting money big time. And we're also not satisfying citizens who are frustrated that the government programs are not delivering like they should do. Now, politicians can understand that. So I think we need to be talking to politicians and people in Treasury, so from the Treasury side, to say, do you realize how much money you're wasting? Because we're not doing evaluation to see what's working or not and why. And then with politicians, we need to say, we want you to have more impact on citizens. And unless we discover how programs are working, we won't understand that. We did an evaluation of the national evaluation system in South Africa, and we came up that the cost benefit of evaluations, with the ratio was somewhere between 1 to 7 and 1 to 13. In other words, it's not whether you can afford to do evaluations, it's can you afford not to do evaluations, because the benefits way outweigh the costs.
Thank you, Ian. I'm conscious of the time, and I think we need to round off. I have one last question, and then I'll give the floor to each of the panel members. So please include Zenda. I know you've raised your hand, but just include it in your final talk, your final minute. But I actually saw one more question.
I think Sabina.
Sabina,
Yeah,
yes.
Sabina.
Sabina, please go ahead.
Yes, hello to everyone. My question follows like that. In Europe, in small countries like Romania or Poland, as I have seen to Monica, we have independent evaluators and commissioned evaluation by the European Commission or World Bank. But the actual use of the evaluations is being done and followed, monitored in government. My question is, would ongoing system be able to improve the result and to stand for the grounding of building new systems for transformation in general?
Okay, thank you very much, Sabina. That's a very good last question. And I'm going to indeed go back to the panel now and give you a chance of short reactions. And before I will round off, Ian, did you have anything to add to your last statement or any issues that you still want to focus on?
So just basically say, I think bureaucracies have an incentive for inertia. And if we want transformation to happen, we're going to need major action from civil society to push for changes and to make politicians realize that voters understand where problems are happening.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a good thought to start off the last round. I'll move over to Christina. Could you have a minute or 2 minutes?
Yeah, thanks for participating in such a rich session. It was really pleasant to be able to hear my colleagues and see how many convergence points we have. For some time, we thought about listening the evaluation community about the concepts of transformation that are around. But I firmly believe that we need to do it the other way around and propose ways of seeing transformation that we can deal with. We can convince parliamentarians, governments, etc., and the civil society especially. I trust more in convincing the civil society than the parliamentarians because they have other interests. But also ourselves. I think that in systems we say this, the changes start individually. So we have to think about this as well. Thank you very much for all of you, the APEA and EQI organizers, and to my colleagues.
Thank you, Christina. So Zenda, let me move over to you and your 2 minutes.
I was interested in the discussion about parliamentarians because it comes back to conventional challenges that we face, not so much with related to transformation. And those remain, but it is important also then to take note of the fact that a lot of transformative action will come from networks, global or regional or national or local networks of people, individuals, organizations who work together towards a common purpose, who can, in ineffective democracies, of which there are many around the world, who can bypass those powerful systems. In other words, I work primarily with global networks at the moment, and I see the potential for shifts in power. We see it also in other movements in daily life. There are shifts in power possible, and the question to us would also be how evaluation can support that. And that's a complex question on its own. But there's a lot of potential in us shifting away from governments where it's clearly a dead end, as it is in many governments and parliamentarians too, where people do not believe in the value of evidence and research and science. Just a quick second point, it's not difficult to start working with a transformation lens or a systems and a complexity lens. The easiest way is to ask the question why across evaluations, within evaluations, because it helps you to understand what connects to what influences what. And that really already helps to understand how systems are connected and how and what matters when you want to make shifts. But there's also something like the Woolrock Foundation that came out with a very simple, very useful, complexity-grounded framework around power relations, purpose, and resource flows. In other words, if an evaluation can focus on those four and do a lot of pattern work around that, it can be very useful. And so the key thing for me is not to get stuck in convention because we cannot afford to, but we can use good practice that we currently have in order to advance into the kind of work that we now need to be busy with. Thank you.
Thank you, Zenda. Adiraj, may I invite you to, as the last of the panel, to relate this to India experiences.
I just want to add that I heard some of the people asking questions talk about the role of government and that of parliament and so on. I can just say, as a representative of the government and as someone that works within government, that there has, at least in an Indian context, there is no significant intervention in terms of dictating evaluation agendas, in terms of dictating the results of evaluation. There is no such interference per se. What there is, and I don't know of a better way to frame this, there might be apathy towards experimenting with new methods, because India has had institutionalized processes for a very, very long time. And so there is not indifference, but skepticism towards adopting new approaches, new ways of looking at data, but definitely not neglect for evaluation in an Indian context.
Well, thank you very much. That's on the one hand posing a major challenge, and on the other hand offering promise. So maybe that's a very good note on which to end. The last thing that I need to do then is to give you a brief overview of the way forward. Well, actually, of the challenges that were posed. We started off with Ian telling us that existing evaluation systems and evaluations often tend to be uncontroversial, and that this is something that we need to step away from. We need to move towards transformational change. And as Christina pointed out to us, the theory on transformational change and on complexity and on systems is very rich, but unfortunately does not lead to easy ways forward. There is a major challenge on thinking through what actually needs to be done and what the opportunities are. And Zenda then pointed out to us that we need different types of evaluators, of evaluation commissioners and financiers. So in fact, we need to transform everything, and we need to transform the evaluation systems as well. And this is actually something that Ajiraj gave us a glimpse on, how this takes shape in the government of India, and very openly so. And Ajiraj actually used terms like dynamic evaluation, which again points to this major challenge that we don't really know. We are starting an adventure into transformational change, and we should do this together. Evaluators should do it with, in the government systems that they work in, with institutions, with everybody. And creating a dynamic evaluation culture is going to be a major challenge for all of us. So thank you very much for attending this. Rajeev, I think we are at the end. Maybe some closing words from you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to say thank you to you, Rob, and thanks to Jan, Christina, Zenda, and Adiraj for an excellent session, excellent presentations, and very rich discussions. And we are looking for these kind of presentations and discussions to initiate kind of a space to think more about transformation and transformational change. So we like to end this session here. And before we close the session, I like to remind you that we are coming back at 5:30. That is 2 hours from now with a very good session titled Adaptation and Resilience to Climate Change, Lessons from Evaluations. And this session will be organized by Global Environment Facility Independent Evaluation Office. So thank you so much, and looking forward to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv.